CHAPTER VIII of Recollections of a Missionary in the Great West by Cyrus Townsend Brady. This recording is in the public domain. To turn to lighter themes, I had a wedding one day at another frontier town. There was no church there, and as we sat waiting for the bride and groom to come into the parlor, some of the men present began giving personal reminiscences of their own weddings, one man speaking thus: "When I was married, nothin' would do my old woman but that I must have a pair of white kids. She'd been raised right, back East, and she knowed they was the proper thing. Kids on them things, boys," he said, bursting into deep laughter, and exhibiting a pair of red hands that would have consorted well with the physique of a Samson. "Just think of it! But I sent East for 'em, and got 'em, too. It took some time, and we had to put off the wettin', for they had to make a special size. And when the weddin' night come, I worked for an hour gettin' 'em on, busted 'em to pieces before I got through, and gosh, I sweat like a roped steer. But my wife, she said, ragged or not ragged, it was the finest weddin' in the Territory, 'cause nobody had never been married in kids there before." The bride, who was a head taller than the groom, was a bold, vigorous, red-faced, masculine-looking woman, while the groom was a rather timid, sallow little man. She said she was 22 and he was 21. It was midsummer, and as they stood under the hanging lamp, the perspiration poured off the bride's face in streams. When we came to that part of the service in which the woman promises to obey her husband-to-be, there was a pause. The big bride looked down on the little groom, and evidently felt the incongruity of the situation. "Can't you let that pass, parson?" she whispered pleadingly. I was inexorable, however, so she finally complied with the requirements, but with an exceedingly bad grace, and we finished the service. I think the company were all surprised that I did not kiss the bride, but I remembered a story told me by another missionary to the effect that on a similar occasion he did kiss the bride, whereupon the husband became abusive and threatened him, at which the lady promptly interfered. Laying aside her bridal veil and catching her husband by the shoulder, she shook him vigorously, remarking at the same time that she didn't allow no man to interfere with her religious privileges, even if he was married to her. At a wedding rehearsal once, the groom, not usually an ornament, though a necessary appanage, was wondering where he should go and what he should do. "Oh," said the best man, "nobody cares what you do and where you go." His intended simpered, looked longingly at him, smiled weakly, and remarked boldly, "The bride cares." Occasionally I attended other weddings. The first time I did so, I happened to sit by a very bright woman who said to me, when I remarked that this was the first wedding I had ever seen outside of an Episcopal church, "Oh, you Episcopalians never see anything outside of your own church, anyway." She was the mother of a delicious little tot, who concluded her baby prayers in this original way: "And please God take care of everybody, and oh God take care of yourself, for you know you are the boss of us all." There was a little town which I will call X, where they had built a nice little church and rectory. Just as they fancied themselves on secure foundation, trouble began. Two of the vestrymen quarreled over the wife of another, and one of the combatants shot the other dead on the public street. The murderer is now serving a life sentence in the penitentiary, capital punishment not being the custom in that commonwealth, for his crime, and the woman has gone I know not where. This was a staggering blow for the little church, and it was followed by another. For the building was shortly afterwards destroyed by a cyclone, which wiped out about one half of the town, by the way, and they had no insurance. There were but 2 or 3 men left, and a dozen women and some children who remained connected with the mission. They had no services except very occasional ones from me, yet they immediately began to raise money for another church building. One of the men still in connection with the mission was a banker. By hard work the women had raised some $300, which had been deposited in the bank of this man. In one of the seasons of panic the bank failed, and they lost everything. It will hardly be believed, but these indomitable women, with no men to help them this time, began their efforts again, efforts which have finally been crowned with well deserved success. This is the kind of stuff the people are made of out there. It requires the most unbounded enthusiasm and determination, the most unyielding perseverance and courage, to be a pioneer in anything, whether it be breaking up a farm or establishing a church. It was in that town that I attended a Union meeting in which one of the ministers began his prayer with words of thanksgiving for the thoughts thunk tonight. And it was near that place also that I was delivering an address before a body of old soldiers, when I was greeted with roars of laughter, the cause of which I was ignorant of until I was told by friends that I had gravely announced myself as the son of a soldier father and the daughter of a soldier mother. The people were not always faithful to the church, however, for I remember one little town which had been more or less abandoned for 12 years. I could not find a single member of the church left, except one old lady who had been bedridden for a number of years. "Yes," she said, in answer to my inquiry, "I'm still a member of the Episcopal Church, I reckon. We did have about a dozen members once. There was," and she called over a number of names. I interrupted her in each case by asking what had become of the person mentioned. "She's joined the Latter-day Saints," was the answer, when the subject of my question was neither removed nor died. "It seems to me that everybody has joined the Latter-day Saints," I commented. "Yes," she replied, "most every one. They had a revival here and got them all except me." "Why didn't they get you?" I asked. "I reckon because I was bedridden and could not get out where they could get at me," she answered frankly. One day the bishop inadvertently sent 2 clergymen to conduct services and preach in a certain church at the same time on Sunday morning. Both were very old men, and each one was fond of preaching. As they were on the retired list, they did not have frequent opportunities for doing so. Each was much surprised to see the other at the church. They had no difficulty, however, in dividing the services between them, but the question as to who was to preach was a harder problem. Each man had made up his mind that he would do the preaching and the other would not enjoy the opportunity. The services went on smoothly enough until the singing of the last verse of the hymn which comes before the sermon. During the singing the younger of the venerable brethren stepped out from his seat and openly knelt down in the sight of everybody for his preliminary prayer, which he concluded in much less time than usual, lest he should be caught napping, and then he rose and turned to the pulpit. The older man for the nonce had dispensed with his private prayers, and as soon as his brother cleric had knelt down, he had promptly walked into the pulpit. As the younger preacher stood looking at his rival in open-mouthed astonishment and consternation, the old man bowed gracefully to him, and, turning to the congregation, triumphantly began his sermon. From old men to children is a long step to take. I had one little friend who was devotedly attached to my son, and he never succeeded in referring to me in any other way than as Mr. Brady's little boy's papa. I came home from church late one evening and found my wife seated on the porch. I was met with the request that I go upstairs and straighten out the children, who had been sent to bed long since, but had not gone to sleep. I found one of them lying on the bed, her feet drawn up and concealed in her nightgown, and the other sitting in a constrained position on the floor in the same way. "What's all the trouble?" I asked. "Sister won't say her prayers," remarked the boy. "I did say them," answered the little girl promptly. "Well, you didn't say 'em to me," he persisted. "I said 'em to God," she replied triumphantly, "and you didn't say yours to anybody." "She's gone to bed with her clothes on," retorted the little boy, attempting to get back on account of this master stroke. "So's he," replied the girl. I examined them and found that they had slipped their nightgowns on over their clothes, and when I asked the reason why, I learned that each had refused to unbutton the other on account of the difficulty about the saying of prayers. It was a theological problem which I found it not easy to unravel. It was another little boy of my acquaintance who said to his mother, when she was about to chastise him upon that part of his anatomy especially appointed for the purpose, "Oh, mamma, won't you please distribute it a little?" There was a certain little girl who belonged to a Sunday school class in a far away prairie village. When I visited the mission I heard several of the little girls recite the catechism. Afterwards I baptized some of them, and then invested each one of them with a little silver cross, made them a pleasant little speech, and finished by giving each one of them a kiss. After I had left the town their teacher was telling them about crosses in general, and the sign of the cross in baptism in particular. "Yes, children," she said, "as long as you are good, that cross the archdeacon made on your forehead shines brightly, and Jesus sees it. But when you are not good, it grows dim, and if you continue to be very bad, it finally fades away." "My," said one sweet little miss, "you can almost see the cross on Mr. Brady's forehead now yourself, can't you?" I think I have never received such a genuine, if utterly undeserved, compliment, nor one that touched me more. From children to lunatics is another long backward leap. I remember a clerical friend of mine who was visiting an old schoolmate who happened to be the curator of a lunatic asylum. As a special favor my friend was taken by his friend into that portion of the asylum in which the dangerous cases were kept, and to which ordinary visitors were not allowed access. He was instructed before entering the different cells as to the nature of each case, and told what he must do. He was informed, before one door, that the man he was about to see was only violent when he was disagreed with. Many men who are popularly supposed to be entirely sane are similarly affected, especially husbands. And that he must acquiesce in everything that was said, under penalty of fearful possibilities. He promised faithfully so to do. The lunatic, who was a rather nice-looking old man, apparently perfectly sane, entered upon a conversation with the clergyman at once. He surprised the minister by remarking, "I suppose you saw that President Cleveland had been impeached the other day for stealing?" "Yes," was the reply, very faintly delivered. "What a pity it is that the Washington Monument was blown up by dynamite by the strikers the other day, isn't it?" was the next question. "An awful pity," said the perspiring clergyman. "And I am so glad that the Queen of England is dead, so she can give her son a chance to reign, aren't you?" continued the old man. "Oh, yes, yes, certainly. It was time for her to die," the clergyman answered desperately. The old man stopped, looked earnestly at his embarrassed visitor, and remarked suavely, "Didn't you say you were a clergyman when you came here?" "Yes," said our friend brightly. It was the only truthful thing he had had an opportunity to say during the interview. He was astonished, however, when the lunatic said quietly, "Well, sir, for a preacher you are the biggest liar I ever saw." Tableau. Speaking of liars reminds me of a little incident. There was a certain man in a certain mission who rarely ever contributed anything to the support of the mission. There are many similar men in all missions. He always sat in the rear of the church, and nobody knew of his practice except the man who took up the collection. He told me. The warden was rather long in receiving the offering one day, and I turned around to see what was the matter. It happened that the man had come in very late, and before he knew it the usher had placed him upon the front seat. My eye, and his eye, and the alms basin all struck the same point at the same time. As usual he put nothing in it, but, not as usual, he blushed violently when he saw that I had noticed it. The next day I went to his dry goods store to buy something. My purchase amounted to $1 or $2. I paid for it, started away with it, and then recollected that I had been told to get another spool of thread, or something of that kind, the cost of which was about 10 cents. He tied up the new parcel for me, and when I handed him the money he pushed it back with a wave à la Podsnap, and this remark: "I happened to be caught in an embarrassing situation yesterday morning in church," which was true. "I forgot to bring my usual collection," which was not true. So I want to donate this little spool of thread as an offering to the Lord. The next time I came to that town I preached on Ananias and Sapphira, and the man did not come back to church for 6 months. Chapter IX.